After Azerbaijan's major attack on Armenia proper in mid-September, evidence emerged of war crimes and other atrocities committed by Azerbaijani forces, including the execution of prisoners, the targeting of civilian infrastructure, and the dismemberment of the corpses of Armenian female service people. The Center for Truth and Justice has been working on gathering evidence and other testimonials, which can be then used as a resource for academic and legal practitioners. To discuss this work, the work of the Center for Truth and Justice, I am joined now by Judge Gassia Akparian. So Ms. Akparian, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning. The Center for Truth and Justice was founded after the 2020 Karabakh War, when Azerbaijani forces committed multiple atrocities. These were all, of course, documented. These acts include the beheadings of Armenian civilians, the execution of unarmed prisoners, and the desecration of cultural heritage. With Azerbaijan's attack in mid-September, can you tell us a bit more about the work and the reaction of the Center for Truth and Justice?
Of course. Thank you for having me. It is unfortunate that the worse things get in Armenia and Karabakh, and when I say worse, the more atrocities Azerbaijan commits, the more work Center for Truth and Justice has to do. It's a direct correlation. The difference between what we do and others who collect information and reports is ours is first verification, because one of the things that happens during wartime or conflict zones anywhere in the world, there's a panic of trying to get information out as soon as possible. And sometimes the information is not so accurate. And in this case, Azerbaijan has a track record of putting out things that are not even related necessarily to Armenia, as you know, from the 44-day war, where there were images and footage from other wars where they were using to terrorize the people of Armenia. So the first thing we do is we verify information, and then we go to take testimonial evidence from either the victim himself or herself, or if they are deceased, murdered, unfortunately mutilated, from a family member who can actually tell the whole story. This is the best mechanism to make sure that the information is accurate and it is told from the perspective of the victim or the victim's family, and it does not bear any political agenda. Because ultimately our purpose is to get this evidence admissible in courts and tribunals. That's really the purpose of why CFTJ was created. It was a reaction to watching 44 days of absolute, unacceptable, horrifying violations of human rights. And so our work, unfortunately, has intensified. At one point, I remember a few months ago, someone said to me, oh, at some point, the center's work is going to end. And I said, I would love for that to happen. But given the recent attack and, honestly, declaration of war on Armenia by Azerbaijan, and on top of that, the inhumane violations of human rights, and, you know, that's a general statement. They're killing, mutilation, and then the fact that they publish it. We don't even have to go looking for this stuff. They publish it because they feel so indignant about their position is why we do what we do. And ultimately, we don't just gather this evidence. We write them, we put them in reports and send them to the necessary places and institutions and law firms and groups that will litigate and fight for the rights of our people.
And it's really an extraordinarily broad network. There are people like yourself and your colleagues in the United States, human rights organizations in Armenia and Yerevan, and then also down towards the border into Karabakh, people on the ground there. I wonder if you could speak a bit on that, the the complexity in terms of who is involved with this project?
Yes, it is a very complicated process that we've set up. Let me back up a little bit. Why did we start doing this? Because international standards of evidence gathering are not practiced by Armenia. They're not practiced by any of the former republics of the former Soviet Union. It's simply something that's just not a part of the education or the gathering system of evidence. And there are very specific evidence rules. We spend a whole year in law school just learning rules of evidence, and then it takes years to practice them correctly. To practice them correctly means practicing them in court through cases. So obviously those of us who are here in the US or the West and understand these standards, we couldn't all pick up and move to Armenia and Karabakh and go out and start collecting this evidence, right? So we needed people on the ground, and we need people who can speak the language properly in their local dialect. You can't pluck someone out of Mission Viejo, California, and send them to somewhere in Artsakh where they only speak their local dialect and say, tell me your deepest sorrows about this war, the things that are so close and personal to you about what they did to your son, right? So it became imminently clear that we had to train people on the ground in Armenia and Karabakh. And ultimately, these skills need to be transferred to Armenia and Artsakh so that it develops internally and the country goes forward and becomes equipped to represent and gather this critical evidence. So we started by we interview and we select a handful of law students or young lawyers, both in Armenia and Artsakh. It's a very selective process because we're looking for people who do not have a political motivation, right? Who are not going to abuse this information because it's completely confidential. It is not allowed to be shared unless the Center for Truth and Justice decides to share it in its own way. Confidentiality agreements have to be signed throughout all those who participate. And then you have to participate in 8 intensive 2-hour per session seminars to actually learn this stuff because there's education involved in it. And as a result, we have teams of students, both in Artsakh and in Armenia, and they are all paired with practicing lawyers in Canada, in the United States, throughout Europe. And Emilio, it's really sad because of the last attack on Armenia by Azerbaijan, we realized we need more volunteers. And I say that it's really sad because I wish I could say we're going the reverse. We're not expanding, but we're expanding in huge numbers. And the beauty, I guess, when you've got an external enemy that is willing to annihilate a nation, the response was huge. We have people from all over the world, lawyers, interns, volunteers, including in Armenia, by the way. So when we did a request for volunteers, we have lawyers in Armenia and other young practitioners reaching out. It's great to have volunteers. This is not fast work. This is very detailed work. We have to teach them, train them, and we have to do quality control over the testimony. And ultimately, this is our way of bearing witness to the truth. So that it is not rewritten as Azerbaijan and Turkey have done for over 100 years. The truth is with the victims, and that's what we're collecting.
And I asked Arsine Arakel of the Center for Truth and Justice a few months back this question, and I wish to ask the same question and pose the same question to you. A lot of the evidence we're talking about here is deeply graphic, is deeply disturbing. What is the approach of the Center for Truth and Justice with regards to those young lawyers perhaps that have to deal with this material, how they can themselves manage their work when having to deal with material that is deeply disturbing?
So it's a part of the training and it's a part of the education that we have. Well, one of our many principles is do no harm. And when we say do no harm to the victim or the witness, because you do not want to re-traumatize them. And yet you need to gather the worst of the worst of the worst, because otherwise, what's the point? Additionally, the students themselves have to be emotionally equipped to do this. You do not take a new student who's just joined Center for Truth and Justice and place them in a situation where they have to get the evidence from, for example, a POW that's been repatriated, okay, who's been through 10 months of torture, or a mother whose son was identified only due to a tattoo she saw on his body, because otherwise the body was completely burnt and mutilated. You do not send a student to take that evidence. That's for the advanced students. So you bring them up, right? You start them by, they practice by interviewing those who were displaced, not to minimize the pain of those people. And then you do these things that I call intense advanced education training, because I have extensive training myself. For 20 years, I was a criminal defense lawyer, and now I'm a felony trial judge. Unfortunately, I interact with the worst of the worst in the world of crime, and I've seen a lot. I've gone to crime scenes and I've seen a lot of, horrible bodies. And so I teach them how to deal with it, how to distance themselves from it, and yet to be able to connect with the victim, right? You have to be able to create this relationship of trust with the victim so that there's a relationship and they give you the evidence you're seeking, and yet you have to be able to distance yourself psychologically. But I'm going to give you a secret that everyone that's experienced has said this. It is harder to watch these atrocities than to be involved in the kind of work we do. As soon as a student or an investigator is involved, it is like a doctor doing surgery who no longer sees the blood, but sees what they're trying to get to. They're trying to cut out that cancer. So the students who've actually done this type of work and gone to gather the worst of the worst, subsequently they feel emotionally impacted. But when they're doing it, they're so immersed in doing it the right way and getting what is so necessary. That's what leads to success. But I'm just going to add one more thing. We also offer counseling and emotional support and psychiatric or psychological support, not just to all of our students and investigators. We also do training in order for them to be self-aware. And we offer it to the victims and the witnesses at the end of the session, because it goes all around. The impact of what Azerbaijan has done to the nation of Armenia is multi-layered, and there are victims at every layer. So we're cognizant of it, and we offer all the support we can give.
And the Center for Truth and Justice not only works with regards to evidence and testimonials, it also provides training and education to young lawyers, students, and professionals. I understand that the Center for Truth and Justice holds clinics or workshops in order to carry out these education programs. Can you tell us a bit about the progress with regards to this sphere of education and informing these young professionals?
Sure. So as I said, during the summer, we do information sessions. We go to the Armenian law schools and Artsakh Law School and explain what the program entails. And we ask people if they're interested to apply. Once we receive their application, which includes a letter of intent, then after we sift through and filter through, we actually interview every single student. And then we do a closed round session, which is our education committee. And as I said, what we're looking for are students who are motivated to, one, advance their legal skills. This is advanced legal skills, but this is skills in the field which can be used as a lawyer throughout your whole life. Two, people who have no political motivation, which means they're not using this as an opportunity or a stepping stone to achieve something political. And then three, the ability to be open-minded and learn how to problem solve. The reason I say problem solve is because when an investigator is sitting across from a victim who has been severely beaten, hurt, burned, by Azerbaijan while in captivity, and the victim is unable to speak, for example, unable to express their thoughts, the student or the investigator must, under those circumstances, have the tools and the skill to find a way to extract that information while being able to calm down the victim. So it's problem solving. And there are some situations that are silly problem solving, but they have to learn how to do it. In other words, there isn't someone sitting next to you telling you what to do. And the other issue is all of Armenia at this point, and Artsakh, is a war zone. No longer a conflict zone, but a war zone. We tell our students, do not go anywhere if you're taking any chances or any risks. Your safety is number one. So they have to use their own abilities to assess very difficult situations. So once we select our students, then we pair up every 2 students with a team leader in the US or in the West that's a practicing lawyer and knows the rules of evidence and international standards and our protocol and our guidelines. And so every 2 students has a team leader, and their relationship becomes very, very close, because the team leader is expected to prepare the investigators before they go out to take testimony from a specific victim, because every victim has a different criteria of how to approach them. And then once the evidence has been recorded and uploaded, the team leader has to watch that testimony and critique it and go back to the team so that they advance. And some of them have advanced fantastically, such that we've hired them and they are now full-time staff. And they now teach the new students. And the law clinic is a 10-month-long program, as I said, with intense 8-session seminars. And ultimately, it's a hands-on in-the-field program where they learn how to do this with the leadership of their team, their team leader.
And I also want to ask a little more of a generalist question. How do you see the importance of legal action in terms of assisting the Armenian cause? Armenian legal teams have opened cases in the European Court of Human Rights, in the International Court of Justice. There is even talk about going to the International Criminal Court. In general, how do you see the importance of legal action in terms of holding Azerbaijan accountable?
It's high time. We should have been doing this starting in 1915. We all talk about the most famous case there is, the Tehlirian case, right? That's nothing. We should learn from history. Had we pursued legal avenues over decades, perhaps Turkey would not continue to deny the genocide of 1915. Let's be honest, this is the continuum of the same policy of Turkey and Azerbaijan. This is their policy of simply removing Armenia from the map and connecting Turkey directly with the rest of Asia. We stand in the middle. So without legal action, without courts, tribunals, without litigation, we cannot hold their feet to the fire. Otherwise, it's, protests every year, walking down the streets on April 24. We demand justice. Well, justice cannot be demanded unless you go to court. So I welcome every group and the sovereignty of Armenia and every lawyer that is taking cases to court and tribunals. And what we do is anyone and everyone that has standing in court is welcome to our evidence. We are your investigators. We don't go out and collect investigation and do investigation at someone's request. We simply know what the necessary evidence is. So we collect it and it's there for them. And we've provided evidence to cases in Germany, in Canada, in the US, and ultimately Armenia. There's a famous line last year when the ICJ came out with its provisional ruling. During the arguments, the International Court of Justice, during argument, the Center for Truth and Justice was named for the evidence and the reports we had provided. So without litigation, without courts, without jurisdiction, without trials, we can't just demand justice. But if we do it the right way and we put the right evidence in front of the right courts, we will win because the truth is on our side. There's no doubt in my mind the truth is on our side. Our job is to package the evidence so that the truth is heard. And once courts start making decisions, Azerbaijan will start feeling the pressure. We'll start realizing, because that's what you need. You need courtroom victories. That's what this is about.
Well, Judge Akparian, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.